Sometimes the kindest hearts are found in the most forgotten corners of life. She had nothing, not comfort, not money, not even a place to rest her head. But when she saw him bleeding by the roadside, she didn't hesitate. Everyone else turned away, pretending not to see. What happened next would change both their lives forever. Maria had learned to live with hunger. For the past 3 years, she had been working as a cleaner in a small-town market, earning just enough to buy stale bread and a cup of tea each day. Her husband had passed away in an accident, and with no children, no parents, and no home of her own, she survived in a tiny wooden shack behind the old bus station. The roof leaked when it rained, and the wind whistled through the cracks in the walls, but it was the only shelter she had. Every morning, she rose before the sun, washed her face with cold water, tied her thinning hair into a bun, and walked to the market. Her clothes were worn out, her shoes had holes, and her hands were rough from years of hard work. Yet she never complained. She always smiled at the vendors, greeted the children, and shared her leftover bread crumbs with the birds that gathered near the gate. People knew her as the quiet lady with kind eyes, but few bothered to learn her name. She spoke softly, kept to herself, and carried a small cloth bag that held everything she owned: a blanket, a tin cup, and an old photograph of her husband. One chilly evening, after sweeping the market floors and washing the stalls, she began her long walk home. The sky was turning gray, and a cold wind rattled the trees. Maria wrapped her thin shawl around her shoulders and hurried along the roadside. As she passed a pile of broken crates and trash near the corner, she heard a faint whimper. She paused and listened again. Another soft cry came, like a small plea for help. Curious and worried, she stepped closer. There, lying half, hidden behind a discarded sack, was a dog. His fur was dirty and matted, and one of his legs was bleeding badly. His eyes were half closed from pain, and his breathing was shallow. Maria knelt down beside him, her heart twisting. "Oh, poor thing," she whispered. She reached out gently, afraid he might bite, but the dog didn't move. He was too weak even to resist. She tore a strip from her shawl and wrapped his injured leg, trying to stop the bleeding. Then, with trembling arms, she lifted him as carefully as she could. He was heavy, and she was tired, but she held him close to her chest and began walking toward her shack. People passing by glanced at her but said nothing. A couple of teenagers laughed quietly as they watched her struggle with the wounded dog, but she paid no attention. Step by step, she made her way home, whispering, "You're safe now. I'll take care of you." That night, she gave the dog the only food she had left: half a piece of bread soaked in warm water. She laid him on her blanket and covered him with her shawl. As she sat beside him, stroking his head, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. She didn't feel alone. The next morning, Maria woke early to check on the dog. He was awake but weak, his eyes watching her with silent fear. She smiled softly and spoke in a gentle tone, "Don't worry, I'm here." But Maria had a problem. She had no money for medicine, no food to spare, and no way to take him to a doctor. Still, she refused to abandon him. She carried a bowl of water to his side and tore another piece of cloth to clean his wound. She spoke soothingly as she worked, praying the bleeding wouldn't start again. Then came another hurdle. Her employer at the market, Mrs. Rojas, called her into the office. The older woman was strict and sharp-tongued, never pleased with anything. "You are late today," she said coldly. "I am sorry." And Maria replied, "I was caring for a hurt dog I found last night." Mrs. Rojas frowned. "A dog. You can't waste time on animals. If you come late again, I'll cut your pay." The words stung, but Maria only nodded. She needed the job to survive. All day, she worked with worry in her heart. What if the dog's wound worsened? What if he passed away alone while she was gone? She swept the floors, wiped the stalls, and cleaned the trash bins, her eyes often filling with tears. During lunch break, she had no food. Yet instead of resting, she went to the back of the market and picked leftover scraps from a vegetable stall, small pieces of carrot, potato peels, and lettuce. She hid them in her bag to take home for the dog. Some vendors noticed and whispered among themselves, "Why is she taking trash?" One asked, probably for herself. Another replied with a shrug. No one asked, no one offered help. When evening came, Maria hurried home. As she approached her shack, her heart pounded with fear. What if she was too late? But when she stepped inside, She saw the dog lift his head slowly. His tail thumped once on the blanket. Tears filled her eyes. She fed him the vegetable scraps and checked his bandage. It was still bleeding. She knew he needed proper care, maybe stitches, maybe medicine. That night, she sat by the small window, her hands clasped tightly. She remembered how people had ignored her when she was hungry, how they walked past her when she cried alone after her husband died. She remembered the laughter of strangers and the coldness in their eyes. Yet here she was, doing everything she could for a creature who couldn't even speak. The next morning was worse. Mrs. Rojas saw a smear of dried blood on Maria's sleeve and wrinkled her nose. "Don't bring your dirty problems here," she snapped. "If that animal becomes your excuse again, you're fired." Maria bowed her head, fighting back tears. She wanted to scream, to beg for understanding, but she stayed silent. That evening, as she walked home hungry and exhausted, she feared the worst. What if kindness wasn't enough? What if she lost everything and still couldn't save him? The sun was setting when Maria reached her shack. Her steps were heavy, her heart filled with dread. But as she neared the door, she heard voices. 2 children were crouched outside, peeking through the cracks. They jumped back when they saw her. "I'm sorry," the little girl cried. "We heard a dog whining. We just wanted to see if he was okay." Maria's worry dropped into a sigh of relief. She opened the door, and the children followed her inside. The dog lay quietly, his eyes brighter than before. The boy knelt beside him. "He looks hurt," he said. "My uncle is a vet. He lives down the road." Maria's eyes widened. "A vet?" The children nodded quickly. "We can call him." Within 30 minutes, a middle-aged man arrived with a small bag of medical supplies. He gently examined the dog, cleaned the wound, and stitched it carefully. Maria watched in stunned silence. "You did well keeping him alive this long." The vet said, "But he needs good food and rest. I'll bring medicine tomorrow." Maria clasped her hands and whispered, "Thank you. I don't have money." He smiled kindly. "Don't worry. My niece told me how you carried him home. That kind of kindness deserves help, not a bill." For the first time in years, Maria felt seen. The children visited every evening, bringing leftover rice, bread, or soup from their home. They sat with the dog, who soon began wagging his tail whenever they entered. But the biggest change came a week later. While Maria was at work, the vet returned with his sister, the children's mother, and a local shop owner named Mr. Diaz, who often sold vegetables at the market. They cleaned the shack, fixed the broken roof, and brought a small mattress and warm blanket for Maria. Mr. Diaz even donated a bag of dog food. When Maria returned that evening, she stopped in shock at the doorway. Her dark, cold shelter was now a clean, warm room. What is this?" she whispered. The children's mother stepped forward gently. "We didn't know your situation. My kids told us how you saved him even when you had nothing. People like you shouldn't be alone." Maria covered her mouth as tears streamed down her face. The dog limped toward her, wagging his tail happily. The vet smiled, and there's more. "Mr. Diaz told the market committee about you. They've decided to raise your pay and give you morning shifts so you can take care of him." Maria collapsed to her knees, overcome by emotion. The children hugged her, and the dog rested his head on her lap. In saving him, she had unknowingly saved herself. The cold world that once ignored her had finally opened its heart. Kindness doesn't ask how much you have, only how much you care. She gave what little she could, and love found its way back to her. One wounded dog revealed the wounds others never saw in her. When we choose compassion, miracles follow quietly behind. Because sometimes saving one life heals 2 souls.